Most B2B companies don't have a growth problem, they have a system problem. Revenue feels random because the machine behind it is incomplete. Marketing is doing stuff, sales is chasing leads, customer success is handling accounts, and leadership is staring at a forecast that's basically a weather report. Optimistic, loosely grounded, and wrong about half the time. There's a name for a machine when it's built correctly, the revenue factory. And today I'm reintroducing it, not as a slogan, but as a buildable, measurable system that turns growth from guesswork into engineering. Welcome to Driving Growth, the go-to-market podcast for traditional B2B businesses that are looking to build systems to create predictable revenue growth, in short, turning their company into a revenue factory. I'm your host, Steve Whittington, president of Roadmap and a believer in one simple truth. Sustainable growth is not an accident. It's engineered, and my company, Roadmap, is a builder of go-to-market systems. On today's show, this is what you're getting. We are going to be providing a complete map of the revenue factory, what it is, how it works, and exactly where you might be leaking. By the end of this episode, our hope is that you can take one page and do what I like to call a back-of-the-napkin type of plan and understand what you think you need to fix first to create your own revenue factory. Let's go. So in season 1 of Driving Growth, we went through all the different components of the revenue factory. And, as I did speeches on this topic and have been talking to clients, something that pops up is, what is the revenue factory? Well, the clearest definition I can give you is a revenue factory is your go-to-market system, the complete connected set of processes, people, and tools that consistently turns the right accounts into closed revenue and closed revenue into retained and expanding customers with full visibility throughout. So think of it as an operating system that runs underneath sales, marketing, and customer success. It's not a department. It's not a CRM. It's not a campaign. It's the infrastructure that connects all of it and makes revenue predictable. Most companies have pieces of this. They have a CRM in place. They have marketing functioning going on over there. They have a sales process that might live in one rep's head. But what they don't have is a system, one where every component is defined, connected, and measured. And if you ever said we need more leads, or the reps aren't closing, or our forecast is always off, these aren't separate problems. They're symptoms of a broken system or an incomplete system. And systems can be implemented and systems can be fixed. So the revenue factory has 6 components. Number 1, always number 1, customer understanding, who you're targeting and why, and how you solve their problems. Your sales process, which shows you how you win on a predictable, repeatable basis. Forecasting and account plans, math-based, not ego-based. Revenue planning, which is a unified plan across sales, marketing, and customer success. A connected platform, which is the tech that ties all of this together. And the last piece of the revenue factory is accountability, the operating rhythm that keeps it all running. So in wrapping all of this up is the bow tie. It's a customer understanding or customer journey framework that starts with acquisition and then continues through mutual commitment to retention and expansion. And you need to think of all of this in that framing, the bow tie framing, and make your customer journey live those steps. Let's walk through all of these one at a time. So the first place you start is deep customer understanding. Now, in season 1, episode 5, we talked at length about how you actually define your ideal client profile, how you actually understand how you tier your accounts, and getting into the buyer's committee. So if you want deeper, we're just going to touch on the highlights here. If you want deeper understanding, go back to season 1, episode 5. Every revenue factory has to start here because the strongest way to destroy efficiency in how you're going to market is to actually be targeting the wrong people, the wrong accounts, and not truly understand what their problem is and how you solve it. So step 1 is you have to define your ideal customer profile. Not anyone in your industry. Your ICP is the customer where you win the most often, that you have the higher margins, where there's less friction. Your work actually just is like a hot knife through butter. It just works. You have those clients. We all have those clients. If we've been in them, you know who your best clients are and you want to get more of them. This is the single most common gap that we find when we work with organizations, is that they have product market fit, but they haven't totally dialed and aimed their go-to-market on who their ICP is. It's too broad. And the result is an unpredictable pipeline and decisions that are made on emotion and gut feel, as opposed to really clearly understanding what moves business forward with your ICP. Now, how you do this and how you actually identify it is your account tiering. Your tier one accounts are your strategic accounts. Those are the ones that buy the most, stay the longest, they fit how you deliver. And really you want to retain them and you want them to expand them. Your tier two accounts are what I call your growth accounts. Those are the ones that you're having to land and expand. And really, it's that 80-20 rule. You want to look at your business and have 80% of your business in tier one and tier two, and then that becomes your ICP that you define. Now, within the company profile of who you're selling to, there is people. We always sell to people, and that's your buying committee. And your buyer is never one person anymore in B2B. It's a set of roles with competing priorities. The CEO might want growth. The VP of sales might want to understand that I got a good product that's going to sell itself. The CFO wants to see ROI on the actual inventory investment that's occurring. Your messaging has to speak to the full committee, and it has to be segmented on a per committee basis as needed. Otherwise, you're not actually addressing all the pain points and all the problems that need to be solving and all the needs and concerns. And your deal's slow, and you might lose some deals because you're not actually addressing everybody in the buying committee. So the customer understanding portion of the revenue factory defines who you need to be talking to, why, and what matters to them. And the sales process helps you actually execute upon it, which is the next part of the revenue factory. Here's a hard question for most leaders, revenue leaders, have to think about. If your top sales reps left tomorrow, would your sales machine still run? Or are you running off of individual effort and a bunch of superstars that are making things happen, and you don't actually have a repeatable process-driven sales process? A revenue factory requires a defined pipeline, clear stages from discovery to close one, qualification criteria that a new rep can follow on day one. This is how you stop the hero selling and start building something that is scalable, sustainable, and can deal with succession planning as needed. Every deal needs a stage definition, entry criteria, exit criteria to move forward, next step as to what's going to happen, and the rep who can explain why and when this deal will close without hand waving and a bunch of gestures, actually documented facts. And marketing has to be wired into these same stages so that marketing and sales are working together. Demand generation that runs disconnected from your pipeline stages creates no activity, no revenue. This is what the revenue factory needs: a clearly defined sales process that goes into a pipeline in which you can audit on a weekly basis, which you can figure out where you have friction, which is slowing down deals, and where you can apply force to accelerate your pipeline. Now, this is where this weekly cadence matters. You have to have a pipeline review meeting as part of your sales process. And if you don't do that, you really don't have a forecast. You just have hopes and not numbers that you're on top of adjusting and working and pulling levers to make happen on a weekly basis. We'll get back to that in the accountability section, but this defined process creates structure, and this predictable growth requires the math from that structure you create. If you want to dive deeper into this, season 1, episode 7 really goes deep into how to define your sales process. And a sales process leads to the next thing, which is forecasting, not hopecasting. In episode 19 of season 1, we go into how to create a forecast instead of a hopecast in deep, deep details. But the highlights here are most forecasts are backward looking and ego driven. It's last year plus 10 or 20%. That's not forecasting. That's a wish dressed up as a spreadsheet. If you're really going to implement a revenue factory, you have to have a forecast that is a mathematical model. It needs inputs you can actually measure. So conversion rate through your sales pipeline, average deal size, sales cycle length. Those are like three legs in a stool that actually gives you the first mathematical model to determine how many deals you need in your pipeline to hit the goals that you need. Okay. And so then you can truly understand what pipeline coverage that you need. As an example, what this looks like in practice. If you need 500K in new revenue next quarter and your average deal is 50K, you need 10 wins. That's pretty simple, right? And so therefore you have to be like, well, what is our close rate? So if your win rate from qualified opportunities is 25%, you'd need 40 qualified opportunities. Now, with that number in place, with these numbers in place, you're not asking, how do we grow? You're not guessing. You're actually looking at how do we get what we need into our revenue factory? What conversion rates can we improve first? And what this is you're shifting from guessing and hoping to engineering. But this math, this is about new acquisition. You also have to think about when you're thinking about the bow tie, you have an existing book of business. You have your reoccurring revenue. Now you have to do your account projections to actually understand what your existing book of business is. And most teams skip this entirely, and it's 80% of your business to get to your revenue goal for the coming year. When you look at your existing book of business, your significant accounts, your tier one, your strategic accounts, your tier two, your growth accounts, you should be able to answer, what is the realistic revenue potential of this account over the next 12 months? What products or services haven't they bought yet? What do they buy on a regular basis? Is there a known need you haven't addressed? What's the expansion runway? When you actually project by account across your tier one and tier two base, something powerful happens. Your forecast stops being a top-down number handed down from up high and becomes a bottom-up build grounded in real account level intelligence. To do this effectively, you have to have conversations with these accounts about what the coming year or the coming period is going to look like. So this leads into the account plans, which is not a note in the CRM. It's a documented strategy for a specific customer and a relationship map across their buying committee. It's the current state of the account. It's the goals that they've told you they have, the opportunities you identified, and the specific plays your team will run to expand that relationship over the next quarter or year. For your top accounts, every rep needs to have this on their accounts. They should be reviewed regularly to update your forecast, to add it into your pipeline. This is your foundation of retention and expansion. Account projections tell you the potential that your existing book of business has, and account plans tell you how you're going to get there. And together, they complete this forecast picture. This is, you've got new acquisition on one side, and you've got existing account retention and growth on the other. Together, that's your complete forecast of how you're going to hit your revenue goal. So with these two pieces combined, you now have a forecast. You now understand the gap you have for hitting your goals. You now have the mathematical model that you need to be able to top up and hit that gap. So it might be that when you look at your existing book of business and you look at the gap to hit your goal, and you look at what your average account size is and what the actual average, top up inventory load in might be. So your deal size, you're like, I got to bring on 10 new accounts and I got to get their inventory load in, and then they have to do a re-up order in order for us to hit our goals. You now know mathematically what you specifically need to do to be able to hit your revenue goals. It's science, it's math. Sales is a science, marketing math. And you then start to solve for the numbers you have to hit. You engineer it in the revenue factory. The first three components of the revenue factory, customer understanding, sales process, and forecasting, are all the inputs needed into building a revenue plan. This year, in season 2 of Driving Growth podcast, episodes 4 and 6, we talk about sales plans and marketing plans, which are your complete revenue plan. And here's what I see when we talk through that we see that sales has a number, marketing has a campaign calendar, and customer success might have a renewal list, but none of them are working from the same plan. That's why you need this all to be one team, one revenue plan. It's a planning problem. So the revenue factory runs on a unified revenue plan, a single document that aligns sales, marketing, and customer success around shared targets, shared definitions, and shared accountability. And we talked about stuff in the forecasting, the numbers you need. Your revenue plan also has to run on math and efficiency ratios. So what we're talking about here is customer acquisition cost. What is the cost that it takes to acquire a new customer? And you can look at that historically, what happened in the previous year and what you did to do that. And that creates efficiency ratios as to which different motions, say, inbound paid ads versus trade shows versus a brand play. What is your customer acquisition cost for those various different plays? And you look at it historically, so you can pick the ones that are most efficient and most effective at actually acquiring customers. It becomes a critical input for doing your planning. You also want to know what the lifetime value of your customer is, because your customer acquisition cost with your customer lifetime value becomes a ratio in which you figure out how you need to resource that play. You want to understand from the planning, your pipeline velocity, close rates, stage conversions, pipeline coverage ratio, all that sort of stuff. You need to have that in place as part of your planning, the math to actually create a plan. These ratios are not vanity metrics. They are diagnostics of your revenue factory. If your CAC is rising and your customer lifetime value is flat, you don't have a sales problem. You might have a positioning, targeting, and retention problem of your accounts. These ratios will tell you what you need to focus on and critically what you need to adjust. So marketing's portion of the revenue plan answers what demand do we need to generate to feed into the pipeline targets? What commands, channels, and content will move the buyer committees at the various stages and get them in there? What's the cost per qualified opportunity? And how does this all justify the spend? Sales portion of the revenue plan will talk about what's the new business target broken down by rep, by segment, by quarter, with quotas. What pipeline coverage do we need in each stage to hit this number? What account plans are in place for the top opportunities? And customer success portion of this plan talks about how we're actually going to retain some of our tiered customers, how we're going to actually do expansion, what accounts are at risk, what's the intervention plan, what is the actual revenue that we're going to get from retention, which we talked about in the forecasting portion of this podcast. So these plans are layered together on the same model, reviewed together, and when you put them all together, you actually then have a revenue plan. And traditionally, they're built in separate rooms and reviewed in separate meetings, and that creates organized chaos. Eliminate that. The revenue factory brings it all together. The bow tie brings it all together. The left side is acquisition. That's marketing and sales working together. The knot is the closed deal, the commitment that each organization makes to each other. The right side of the bow tie is retention and expansion, with customer success executing on these account plans and bringing in the targets that you set. The revenue plan connects all of this, and it's a document that makes the bow tie operational. And here's the business case for engineering on the right side, retention expansion, which is so often overlooked. Retention expansion, the existing customers, that is always the cheapest growth you'll ever buy. A customer that always trusts you, already uses your product, and already has a problem that you can solve. That's not a marketing challenge. That's resourcing, account management. It's an opportunity. Make sure that you resource and build a plan around it. Now, let's talk about how you execute this plan you built week over week without letting it drift. So we've talked about the first four components of the revenue factory: customer understanding, sales process, forecasting, account plans, and then building a revenue plan that gives you the how you're going to execute and tie all these things together. Now, this whole revenue factory needs to run on a connected platform, not a random collection of tools, but a system where every piece talks to each other. And there's really four main components in most cases that have to work together. First off, your website. It's not a brochure, it's a conversion engine. It must reflect your positioning, speak to your buyer committee, drive a clear next step. Demand generation obviously brings people to your website, creates qualified attention, meetings, not vanity metrics. If it's a campaign that can't be tied to pipeline, it's entertainment. And honestly, like I look at some trade show attendance, it's like you're going there, you're having casual conversations as opposed to committed conversations. It's not much more than a trip to Louisville at an egg show that's not driving the business. And that's not acceptable. So you need your website, you need demand generation, and you need demand capture, landing pages, lead magnets, routing, follow-up automation, how you're actually taking those conversations at a trade show and putting them into your CRM and having a sequence. You can't have slow follow-up that kills conversion. This is a solvable problem. So you have to say, okay, well, we're going to do demand generation. How are we going to capture it? That's based off of an online platform or website. And all of this, the backbone is everything has to live in a CRM. That's non-negotiable in today's world. And so you have a CRM with pipeline stages, automation, forecasting, dashboards. You can have your account plans in there, clean data. It's not a min work. This is a system of record for your entire revenue factory. And if it's not being used, your factory, it isn't running. It doesn't have the inputs to run. It's blind. So when you connect these four pieces, you get compounding effects. You get faster responses, better handoffs, cleaner attribution, forecasting that reflects reality instead of hope. This is a platform that doesn't run on itself, though. It requires one final component of the revenue factory: accountability. So you can have the best documented ideal client profile, tight sales process, beautiful revenue plan, and a CRM that your admin or your CFO loves because everything's in there and clean, and you're ready to go at the start of your next fiscal. And then by the end of Q1, you've still missed your number. Why? Because without a consistent operating rhythm, without accountability, the plan drifts, deals go stale, issues get buried, and by the time leadership sees a problem, it's now too late to fix it for that fiscal. Accountability is not micromanagement. It's the cadence that keeps the revenue factory running. Here's what this rhythm looks like in practice. And for those of you familiar with EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system, there's really three components. First one is you need to have your revenue scorecard. The second one is you need to have your weekly pipeline inspection. And the third is a quarterly business review to make sure that your plan and your revenue factory is on track. So let's break into the first component. Now we dive into this first component, the revenue scorecard, in season 1, episode 9. But every revenue team needs to be working from a shared scorecard, a single view of the metrics that matter most. And this is updated weekly. And there really are three components that you need to think about as to what you want. And these scorecards, by the way, should have about 15 metrics that you're measuring at most. But it's going to be in the groups of what are your leading indicators. And that could be, some certain activity metrics that create pipelines, such as calls, meetings, proposals, pitches, all that sort of stuff. You as your, it's different on a per company basis, but you have the leading ones. And then you have some actuals, which could be pipeline created this week versus target, pipeline coverage, opportunities closed, that sort of stuff. And then you have your lagging, which comes down to deliveries. It could be revenue billings is a lagging one because you get the bookings and you get the billings, customer satisfaction, that sort of stuff. This is what a scorecard needs to cover, and you'll dial it in time as you start to do your weekly pipeline inspections. These metrics you will true up over time as you start doing your weekly pipeline inspections. So the weekly pipeline inspection is where, it's on the court. This is where the rubber hits the road. You have your scorecard. It's not a status update. It's a structured review. It runs on time. It follows a format, and it produces decisions, not just discussion. The format is simple. You start with your scorecard, and the numbers speak to you. If you have green, which means everything is okay against targets. If you have yellow, which means that it's, starting to be an issue. And then if you have red, which is now an issue, you have to solve for it. And you push that down in the agenda. You say, hey, this one is off track. It's an issue. Push it down. We'll talk about it later. You then move deep into your pipeline inspection. You walk through your active deals, what stages they're at, what's the close date, what's the risk, what needs to happen to move this forward. And a good way to do this is, I say, let's focus. Let's not worry about the ones that we're pretty confident that are going to close. Let's worry about the issue ones. And I want to know what are the top 5 deals you're going to close this week and how you're going to do it. And so every rep comes prepared. They talk about that. You go through the pipeline. Then you actually start to talk about issues from the scorecard. Is there issues when you've done the actual pipeline inspection? This one is at risk. It's not, it's a problem. You've pushed it down. You start to review their issues and solve for them as a team right there. Get it figured out, get it solved, close with commitments. Each person leaves with, hey, these are the deals I'm going to close. Here's the issues of how I'm solving for them. Done well, this meeting is, could take up to 90 minutes, but usually it's a 45 to 60 minute meeting, which you're going through with momentum. It's not ad hoc. It's definitely a working session on how to drive pipeline and push your revenue factory forward. Zooming out, you want to take, a quarterly review. So that's where you take your overall revenue plan and you look at, hey, what's against the actual of what's occurred. You have your account update projections, you refresh account plans for the quarter on tier one. You adjust your math as needed if you're a little behind, a little ahead, and you really take a recalibration view of your revenue factory. Now leadership can look at what your team has done. You've got the accountability, the scorecard, the weekly cadence, and then you've sat and you've adjusted. You're like, here's what we need to recalibrate. Here's how we're going to adjust. Here's how we're going to get back on track, or hey, we are ahead of plan, and so we're going to keep that momentum going. It's a critical component that feeds back to leadership and creates confidence in the overall revenue factory that you're building. If you're new to driving growth, this episode was a lot. It was explaining the entire revenue factory that has been broke out over a season and a half in separate independent episodes that you can go back and listen to. However, here's my challenge to you. On one page, get the inputs for your revenue factory down, which starts with your ICP. Go into your P&L, find out who your top customers are. Those are the tier ones. Write down the firmographics. Write down the names of who you usually sell to. Maybe it's a VP of sales. Maybe it's the dealer principal or the owner or whatever it might be. That's your buying committee. Get some customer understanding sorted out first, just at a basic level. Second, think about what your sales process is. Write down the stages that your reps are going through or what you hope they are going through. Just document, say, the 3 to 5 stages that you know to be true to exist. Last piece is think about your forecast. Think about what's gone into the forecast and how it's actually going to be built. Maybe look at understanding what that book of business you have, that reoccurring revenue is, so you can see what you need to bring in with net new. And then you can understand what you're up against. With those components, you are now ready for the next step to start building your revenue factory, building a revenue plan. If you have found this useful, go to roadmapagency.com/podcast and download the Revenue Factory Toolkit, in which you will receive the mathematical models we talked about today and the framework for building your go-to-market system. Also, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, with new episodes dropping the first and third Wednesday of every month. I'm Steve Whittington. Thanks for listening. Keep building your revenue factory one brick at a time.